The Battle of the Java Sea was a decisive naval battle of the Pacific campaign of World War II. Allied navies suffered a disastrous defeat at the hand of the Imperial Japanese Navy on the 27th of February 1942, and in secondary actions over successive days. The Allied strike force commander, Dutch Rear-Admiral Karel Doorman, was killed. The aftermath of the battle included several smaller actions around Java, including the smaller but also significant Battle of Sunda Strait. These defeats led to Japanese occupation of the entire Netherlands East Indies. At the time, the battle was the largest surface ship engagement since the Battle of Jutland in 1916. Background: the Japanese invasion of the Dutch East Indies progressed at a rapid pace as they advanced from the Palau Islands colony and captured bases in Sarawak and the southern Philippines. They seized bases in eastern Borneo and in northern Celebes, while troop convoys, screened by destroyers and cruisers with air support provided by swarms of fighters operating from captured bases, steamed southward through the Makassar Strait and into the Malacca Sea. To oppose these invading forces was a small force consisting of Dutch, American, British and Australian warships, many of them of World War I vintage, initially under the command of Admiral Thomas C. Hart. On the 23rd of January 1942, a force of 4 American destroyers attacked a Japanese invasion convoy in Makassar Strait as it approached Balikpapan in Borneo. On the 13th of February, the Allies fought unsuccessfully in the Battle of Palembang to prevent the Japanese from capturing the major oil port in eastern Sumatra. On the night of 19-20 February, an Allied force attacked the eastern invasion force off Bali in the Battle of Bidung Strait. Also on the 19th of February, the Japanese made 2 air raids on Darwin on the Australia mainland, one from carrier-based planes and the other by land-based planes. The destruction of Darwin rendered it useless as a supply and naval base to support operations in the East Indies. Shortly before the battle commenced, the odds were not good for the Allied forces. They lacked cohesion and were demoralized by constant air attacks and a general sentiment that the Japanese were unbeatable. In addition, the coordination between Allied navies and air forces was poor. Battle: the Japanese amphibious forces gathered to strike Java, and on the 27th of February 1942, the main Allied naval force, under Doorman, sailed northeast from Surabaya to intercept a convoy of the Eastern Invasion Force approaching from the Makassar Strait. The Eastern Strike Force, as it was known, consisted of 2 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 9 destroyers. The Japanese task force protecting the convoy, commanded by Rear-Admiral Takeo Takagi, consisted of 2 heavy and 2 light cruisers and 14 destroyers, including the 4th Destroyer Squadron under the command of Rear-Admiral Shoji Nishimura. The Japanese heavy cruisers were much more powerful, armed with 10 8-inch guns each and superb torpedoes. By comparison, Exeter was armed only with 6 8-inch guns, and only 6 of Houston's 9 8-inch guns remained operable after her aft turret had been knocked out. In an earlier air attack, the Allied force engaged the Japanese in the Java Sea, and the battle raged intermittently from mid-afternoon to midnight as the Allies tried to reach and attack the troop transports of the Java invasion fleet, but they were repulsed by superior firepower. The Allies had local air superiority during the daylight hours because Japanese air power could not reach the fleet in the bad weather. The weather also hindered communications, making cooperation between the many Allied parties involved in reconnaissance, air cover and fleet headquarters even worse than it already was. The Japanese also jammed the radio frequencies. Exeter was the only ship in the battle equipped with radar, an emerging technology at the time. The battle consisted of a series of attempts over a 7-hour period by Doorman's combined striking force to reach and attack the invasion convoy. Each was rebuffed by the escort force, with heavy losses being inflicted on the Allies. The fleet sighted each other at about 1600 on the 27th of February and closed to firing range, opening fire at 1616. Both sides exhibited poor gunnery and torpedo skills during this phase of the battle. Despite her recent refit, Exeter's shells did not come close to the Japanese ships, while Houston only managed to achieve a straddle on one of the opposing cruisers. The only notable result of the initial gunnery exchange was Exeter being critically damaged by a hit in the boiler room from an 8-inch shell. The ship then limped away to Surabaya, escorted by Whitworth. The Japanese launched 2 huge torpedo salvos, consisting of 92 torpedoes in all, but scored only 1 hit on Cortana. She was struck by a long lance, broke in 2 and sank rapidly after the hit. Electra, covering Exeter, engaged in a duel with Jintsu and Asagumo, scoring several hits but suffering severe damage to her superstructure. After a serious fire started on Electra and her remaining turret ran out of ammunition, abandon ship was ordered. On the Japanese side, only Asagumo was forced to retire because of damage. The Allied fleet broke off and turned away around 1800, covered by a smokescreen laid by the 4 destroyers of U.S. Destroyer Division 58. They also launched a torpedo attack, but at too long a range to be effective. Doorman's force turned south toward the Java coast, then west and north as night fell in an attempt to evade the Japanese escort group and fall on the convoy. It was at this point the ships of days.The 58, the torpedoes expended, left on their own initiative to return to Surabaya. Shortly after, at 21:25, Jupiter ran onto a mine and was sunk, while about 20 minutes later, the fleet passed where Cortana had sunk earlier. An encounter was detached to pick up survivors. Doorman's command, now reduced to 4 cruisers, again encountered the Japanese escort group at 2300. Both columns exchanged fire in the darkness at long range, until the Reuter and Java were sunk by 1 devastating torpedo salvo. Doorman and most of his crew went down with the Reuter. Only 111 were saved from both ships. Only the cruisers Perth and Houston remained low on fuel and ammunition, and following Doorman's last instructions, the 2 ships retired, arriving at Tanjung Priok on the 28th of February. Although the Allied fleet did not reach the invasion fleet, the battle did give the defenders of Java a 1-day respite. Aftermath: Battle of Sunda Strait. Perth and Houston were at Tanjung Priok on the 28th of February when they received orders to sail through Sunda Strait to Cilacap. Material was running short in Java, and neither was able to rearm or fully refuel. Departing at 2100 on the 28th of February for the Sunda Strait, by chance they encountered the main Japanese invasion fleet for West Java in Bantam Bay. The Allied ships were engaged by at least 3 cruisers and several destroyers, in a ferocious night action that ended after midnight on the 1st of March. Perth and Houston were sunk. A Japanese minesweeper and a troop transport were sunk by friendly fire, while 3 other transports were damaged and had to be beached. 2nd Java Sea. After emergency repairs, the badly damaged Exeter left Surabaya for Ceylon. She departed at dusk on the 28th of February and limped toward Sunda Strait, escorted by the destroyers HMS Encounter and Uspo. However, all 3 ships were intercepted by the Japanese heavy cruisers Nachi, Haguro, Mayoko and Ashigara, and their attendant destroyers on the morning of the 1st of March. Exeter and Encounter were sunk together around noon, while Pope escaped only to be sunk several hours later by aerial attack. Bali Strait. The 4 U.S. destroyers of Disron 58, John D. Edwards, John D. Ford, Alden, and Paul Jones, were also at Surabaya. They left for Australia at nightfall on the 28th of February. After a brief encounter with a Japanese destroyer in the Bali Strait, which they were able to evade, they reached Fremantle safely on the 4th of March. Consequences: a further Dutch and 2 American destroyers were sunk as they attempted to escape to Australia. The main ABDA naval force had been almost totally destroyed. 10 ships and approximately 2,173 sailors had been lost. The Battle of the Java Sea ended significant Allied naval operations in Southeast Asia in 1942, and Japanese land forces invaded Java on the 28th of February. The Dutch surface fleet was practically eradicated from the Asian waters, and the Netherlands would never reclaim full control of its colony. The Japanese had laid open the control of one of the most important food-producing regions, Java, and by conquering the Dutch East Indies, Japan also gained ultimate control over the sources of the 4th largest oil producer in the world in 1940. The US and Royal Air Force then started to retreat to Australia. Dutch troops, aided by British remnants, fought fiercely for a week. In the campaign, the Japanese executed many Allied powers and sympathizing Indonesians. Despite the logistical problems, the decisive factor in Japan's favor seems to have been air power. Eventually, the Japanese won this decisive battle of attrition, and ABDA forces surrendered on the 9th of March.